My name is Crystal Kimwan. I'm from Akwamikong First Nation. I am a bio mother to Mishan, Michael, who lives with alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder. It's forever changing. Everything is changing all the time. And this is my brother Martin Kimwan. He lives with, or he's suspected of undiagnosed fetal alcohol effects, as am I. Yeah.
My name's Michael. I'm 17 years old. I'm from Akwamikong, and I am diagnosed with ARND or FASD without features. So I noticed that I was different from the other kids when I was in grade 3 because I was in speech therapy and stuff for and other little programs to help with my learning. No one else was in them. So. When I got tested, it made me feel set apart from everybody because I knew I was different, and I knew that all the answers that I had, like why I was so different and why I felt differently from everybody. I was 9 years old when my mom told me that I was diagnosed with FASD, around 9 or 11. She didn't beat around the bush or anything. She just told me that it was a disability caused by alcohol consumption. Well, she was breastfeeding me. She told it how it was. When I first found out, I was too young to realize how hard it'll be when I grow up. But when I reached around 13 and 14, when I started getting into high school and work started getting harder, I definitely had resentment towards my mom. But after a while, I just learned to live with it. Yeah, it's really easy to go back and blame. If you have someone to blame them. Yeah, I do blame my mom a lot, but it's usually just for a little bit, like I'll blame her, you know? What I find most challenging about having FASD is just working with yourself through day after day. Just trying to get through anxiety attacks and other stuff that just comes with the disability. Learning, trying to work with all the information and stuff. Sometimes it gets hard to understand just basic things like taking the bus and stuff. School for me is it's difficult. Like it's really difficult keeping up with everybody, and just knowing that you can't keep up with people is kind of hard. Is the hard part. But there's, you got your IPs and stuff like that, and they help out a lot. But it's not. Sometimes it's not enough, like learning wise. What I like about school is how busy it keeps me. It's way better than sitting at home. And yeah, I'd really want to be more independent from ODSP and stuff like that. I'd want to be working rather than being on ODSP. I'm definitely proud of myself by being independent, getting a job, and finding an apartment. Most kids my age aren't really doing that right now, right? And just the fact that how I'm living with FASD and how I can manage and on my own, it gives me more hope. But yeah, I'm really proud of myself for the person I became today. Um, you know, from when I got my diagnosis to now, my mom and family, we really changed our ways and focused more around the culture and stuff. I'm really proud that I could I was more diagnosed earlier, um, so we got that in our life now, and I'm I'm really proud of myself because that I got a job and I'm independent, and I just follow, respect all the 7 grandfather teachings day to day. Yeah, makes you a good person. Uh, but that's what I'm most proud of. Got my license too. Everything. And yeah, I'm still in. I culture and stuff. You know, we're drumming, dancing, and how we still hold on to that culture. I want to give thanks to all my supports. My mom's a big one. She raised me to become the person I am today, and I want to give thanks to powwow community and my drum group, and my drum brothers and the Native Friendship Center. They helped out like a lot with just helping my mom out when times got hard and stuff. Yeah, they all basic they all really raised me all together. My supports family, my uncle. FASD taught me persistence, to not give up. There's been many times where I just wanted to give up on a lot of things. And patience, persistence and patience. It taught me patience because, you know, even when times got rough, if you sit through it, you like, it'll get better at the end, right? But, and overall, it just really taught me how to cope with my my disability more, work around things, work so things are better for me. What I really want to get out there for other people with FASD is that it doesn't ground you from being successful. You could still go to school and get a job. Your disability doesn't really hold you down and prevent you from doing any of that. Because I managed to get a job and I'm still in school. It's just harder. It's just harder. That's it.
My name is Crystal Kimwan. I'm from Wakumakong, unceded Indian Reserve. My Anishinaabe Noswin is Bedabano Gijgokwe Dijnakas. I'm of the Eagle clan, and yeah, I am a bio mother of Michael and a support person to my brother Martin, who lives with fetal alcohol effects, and myself am suspected of but undiagnosed. My relationship with Michael's father wasn't great. There was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of domestic abuse, domestic violence, and you have to talk about addiction in this. It's not something that can go unstated. I've struggled with addiction since I was, when did I have my first drink? I was probably 8 years old. It was a party at the house. It was an access visit we had. My brother and I would go home. We were Crown Wards. And that was my first drink. And from that point, I vowed to never be like my mother. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I didn't want to struggle like that. You know, I looked down on her for a very, very long time. I was ashamed of my mother for a very, very long time. Until I was 18 and phased out of the system and returned back home to our community, both my brother and I. And I was able to finally sit and get to know my mother for who she was and not just the alcoholic we grew up with. I got to hear about her story. I got to hear about her experiences, her time within the child welfare system. And it wasn't a good experience for her. She went through a lot of abuse. She was sexually abused, physically abused. So addiction was something my brother and I grew up witnessing, but it's also something that our mother grew up witnessing as well. So with that addiction and, you know, the neglect that comes with that, my mother was placed in care. So I'm speaking to this because I have to stress my story is my son lives with fetal alcohol effects because I've struggled with addiction. My mother struggled with addiction. Her grandmother, her mother before her struggled with addiction. It's an intergenerational struggle. I struggle with it still today. But back to FASD and being 7-year-old Crystal and having my first drink when my mother was passed out and getting drunk at 7. And vowing from that point and being really, really sick. I remember being really, really sick, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to be like my mom. I'd see my mom on the floor, and it was just sad. I didn't want to do that. So through my teenage years, I struggled with everything else but alcohol. I struggled. I did all sorts of drugs. You don't need to know, but to me, that was justifying I'm not like my mom because I didn't want to be like my mom. I struggled with a heroin addiction until I was about 17. I became pregnant with my daughter, who's actually older than Michael. Phased out of the system, pregnant with my daughter, and returned back to the community. That's where we got to get to know our mom. I understood her story a little more. I understood her struggles and why it was so difficult for her to stop drinking. As a child of a parent who struggles with addiction, you want to know why. And I remember my children asking me this when they were small. Don't you love us enough to stop? And this is why I really want to stress it through. And I remember they were crying. My Aunt Phyllis had brought them. She tracked me down in the community. And she stood both my children in front of me. And I can't remember if it was Mishan, Michael, or Alea that had asked me that. And I did an article for the Sudbury Star, Sudbury Northern Life. They came, you were there, Roberta was there. And I did an interview there. And that's one thing that stuck with me because I remember that. Like, doesn't our mom love us enough to stop? Why are we in this home? You know? And to hear my own children say that to me, I was repeating that. So you have to understand it from a point, and I think Roberta, you had said during that interview as well that it's not just the addiction, that these women carry trauma, right? And I shared a little bit of that story about our experiences that my brother and I had witnessed. And, you know, all the effects that has on a young child, a teenager, and a young mother, you know, all those things you lack growing up. There was not a lot of education about FASD. We knew alcoholism was a big thing within the First Nation community. It was everywhere. It happened. Everybody was doing it. It was normal. It was normalized. And did I know? I think you do kind of know. You might not have the education or somebody sitting across from you saying it's wrong, but morally it felt wrong. It just didn't feel right. When I was pregnant with Michael, and I gave a little bit of history around, you know, the kind of relationship him and his father and myself had. There was alcoholism, there was domestic violence. So keeping in mind the historical context my brother and I grew up in and the trauma that we still carried, addiction was a way to mask that. I don't want to focus on addiction. We're trying to stay focused on the FASD. And it's not to justify it, but it was a coping mechanism. And in the article I had done there, I equated it to when you get burned, when you burn your skin and you put it under cold water, it immediately stops hurting. That's addiction. That's drinking alcohol. That's doing heroin. That's taking pills, whatever it is. That's having that smoke when you're stressed out. That's what it was like. So when those emotions, when I was pregnant with Michael, did I know right away I was pregnant? No, I didn't know. Did I know after? Yeah, I did know after. Did I still consume alcohol when I knew I was pregnant? Yes, I did. But it wasn't the same. Drinking prior to that and going to a party, you could enjoy yourself. The drinking didn't happen at parties because there was that shame associated with, you announced to the family that you were having a child, you weren't going to go to the family party and drink. Some people did and just didn't give a shit on the reserve, but I couldn't do that. It was, I would buy a 12-pack and sit at home when his dad was at the dance or when his dad was at the family party. And I would be at home consuming because it hurt. Tie it into abandonment issues, however you want to do it. But that addiction, that consuming alcohol, made life a little bit easier to bear. And I continued to drink, not every day, but maybe every 2 weeks, or when his dad would go out. But I stopped when there's a point when you're carrying baby in your belly that you could feel the movement. You could feel a flutter. It's almost like if you were describing it to a guy, like the gas that kind of bloated or, you need to use the washroom, whatever, that feeling. So once I got to that point, I could no longer consume or bring myself to consume alcohol. So that's when I stopped. Now, the consuming alcohol may have stopped, but I still needed to cope. I still needed to get through when those ugly feelings came up. So that's when self-harm started. It was finding that something to make the ugly go away. That's how I can describe it. So that was that. Did I know I was pregnant? Did I consume alcohol when I knew I was pregnant? Yes, I did. And that is why I consumed alcohol when I knew I was pregnant. I think because, I was on the reserve. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody else's business. And you didn't go to the local health center to go and talk to a counselor about your addiction because you were drinking with that person the night before at the dance. So it wasn't until I knew I had stopped at 3 months, but I didn't think of the effects it would have had. Like nobody, you knew it was wrong, but you didn't know the physical effects. You didn't know, about that sort of stuff. And I was still carrying all this crap and trauma and everything. But it wasn't until when I moved to the city. No, we were still on the reserve because you were going to speech. He was going to speech and language. So we started to notice things around nursery school, I guess, junior school, where they call it tongue-tied then. Like they were almost going to snip the bottom, he probably doesn't remember, but snip the bottom of so he could pronounce better. So he had a speech and language pathologist. There were certain areas that were delayed, and they had therapists come in and help him. Cognition, different things like that. The little puzzles wouldn't go to where they're supposed to be, but in his mind, that's where it was supposed to go, but just things like that. And being a young mom, I still carried a lot of stuff and wasn't ready to deal with, why I struggled with an addiction. So it was Auntie Phyllis that said, we kind of knew my brother, Martin, was affected by my mom's drinking, just the impulse control, the anger. And even though Michael was a tiny little boy, he was a very angry little boy when he didn't get his way. If you couldn't understand him, and nobody could understand him except Leia, she had like this, this is what he wants. He would get mad. He would like kick stuff and throw stuff. So you saw that anger, and Phyllis saw it because she saw us when we were little, and she saw the same thing in Mishan. So, but when she said that, when she said, do you think Michael might have FAS? I was angry. Fuck no. I wasn't ready to confront it. Or I wasn't ready to face that part of it. So I denied it. Denial, right? My kid that's not why, Maybe it was that time he fell off the trampoline, and you're thinking of all these other reasons why. It's not my fault. I'm not the reason why he struggles. That's a huge step for a mom to have to face. I didn't face it he got diagnosed, I want to say about 9 or 10. I don't know the exact age. You would know, Roberta, because it should be in the file. But we were living in Sudbury then, and I was going to the Friendship Center for school. Got to a point where I had actually lost custody of my own children because of my addiction, because of not dealing with that stuff. So I was living my mom's life. From a little girl, I didn't want to be my mom, but I saw myself becoming my mom. And then my kids were taken. And then I had child welfare, CAS at the time, tell me that I needed to start planning for a more permanent home for my children, long-term, 18 years old. And that was it for me. It was, you're mom, and you're gonna lose your kids. This shouldn't hurt, but it does. I thought I was done. So I knew I had to step up. I knew I had to start doing the work I needed to do to get well, however that looked. I didn't know how it looked because I hadn't walked this healing ever. And it started with seeing a psychiatrist, started with seeing therapists, and I did all of that. I did the mainstream, I did the Western, going to sweat lodges, healing lodges, family treatment centers. And through that, dealing with my own hurts, addressing that addiction, doing all that ugly stuff everybody's afraid to look at because of it hurts, it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's awkward. Until I was able to do that, then I was able to accept the fact that my son struggles the way he does because of that addiction. It was tough in the sense that I had forgiven myself, I guess, in some way. I didn't know how to have that conversation with him. And when we went through the diagnostic process, I was, I knew who I was. I knew I was Crystal Kimwan. I was in Crown Ward. My mother was an alcoholic. I was sexually abused. I was physically abused. I had done that work. I had walked through that. But having that conversation with him, there was no way in hell I could do that. So we went through the diagnostic process. I didn't tell him I drank and this is why you struggle. I said, we're trying to figure out why you have a hard time in school. We're trying to figure out, we want to know why. I couldn't even bring myself to say, so back to the therapist I went and worked on that, the guilt I had. And I did it through tears. And you have to remember that I had done a lot of healing, so my kids walked with me a little bit too. They went to a family treatment center when mom was dealing with her addiction at that time. And it's the fucked up thing about addiction, it'll creep up throughout your life. But at that time, at the family treatment center, there was an activity that the counselors had the children do. And they had all these facial expressions in the center of the floor. And the counselors asked the children to go and pick a facial expression that you felt when mom was drinking or when mom was using. So Alea and Michael went to the center of the floor. They picked up a picture. Michael's was like, it was a little drawing, and I wish I had brought it. I could have held it up. But, and I still have it. It was afraid. And Alea had chose one that, it was a girl, she was kind of like gothic, dark, sad. So, and then they had, on the reverse side of it, they had the children write what this picture means. Michael's was, I was afraid. I didn't know when mom was coming home. Alea was, I didn't know what to cook. I had to feed Michael. So she was that caretaker role. I was that caretaker role, taking care of my brother when my mom struggled with addiction. So that cycle was repeating itself. And that was a pivotal time through that part of my healing that woke me. And I still struggled. There was relapses. But I was getting to where I needed to be. I fell a lot, and I still fall. But we got to good ground. My children returned home. My file was closed. I went to school at the Friendship Center, got my diploma, went to university, got my social work degree, continued on to Laurier for my master's degree. And these guys saw all of that. They saw from when life was shit to mom struggle through university to sitting in hallways at the university because I couldn't find a sitter at night. They saw all of that. They saw, this amazing fucking human, or however you want to call it. Anybody who's able to kick addiction is amazing in my eyes, not just me, everybody. But even if it's for a little while. One thing though, when I did, and you got to understand, I went through all that healing. I was a little bit in university before I was able to finally have that conversation with him. 2 years into university, I sat and I said, you remember that testing? He might have been like 11 then, so it might have been about a year after or a year and a half after. That testing was to see how my addiction affected you in my belly while you were growing. And you live with the struggles you have today because of my choices. And they are choices. As much as, they say an addict doesn't, they're an addict, they don't have the ability to choose. We do. The moment we pick up whatever it is, that's our choice. When we continue to go on and on and on, then it changes the wiring, it changes how we function, and all that sort of stuff. But we do, in the beginning, have that choice. And I had that choice. So, but the amazing thing about that, because my children walked with me through my healing for a little bit and through their own healing, because they went to therapists too, and healing lodges, and Enotic, White Buffalo Healing Lodge. They had the Friendship Center, they had Shkagamikwe. Michael actually said, I forgive you. He gave me a hug. Because he understood, and he understood the life that me and Martin had gone through. He saw the struggle with me and his dad. So he understood. And he had these amazing teachings with the drum group and all that cultural stuff around him. So, yeah. But not every mom can do that. And when you talk about that diagnostic part and when you're able to have that conversation, I know moms who have grown children, and I was just talking with Roberta earlier, how we were at that FASD conference. I wanted to go up there, Crystal, but I knew I would just cry because that guilt. And when you talk, there's that guilt there. It holds so many moms back. It holds so many children back. The sooner you can own your choices while that baby is growing in your belly, the sooner you're able to help. Like, I wish I would have been able to accept the fact that my alcohol consumption impacted my son the moment he came out. He was 9-10 years old when I was able to do that, but that has drastically changed. And you look at my brother, we didn't know until he was we kind of sort of knew, but diagnostically, like 30, 25. And by then it was like impulsive behavior, violent man, dangerous offender, prison time, all of this. Had that have been happened, even you see at Michael's age, 10, 11, his life is so much different. Had it been confronted when he was brand new baby out of the womb, huge. So yeah, the sooner the better. But moms need support through that too. So we can talk about a little bit about the struggles. I know you talked about the guilt. Like today as a teenager, like that, I said the guilt, but the guilt doesn't go away. So, and the mom I was talking to last night with the 3 older children that are adults now that wanted to come to that stage at the FASD conference. But if she had done that, she wouldn't have been able to get anything out of her mouth because of that guilt. And, some moms, and this is the thing with the First Nation community, like when I was, how old was I with Michael? I might have been 20 or 19. It was normalized. It was something you did every single weekend. And I could remember sitting beside a mom, she might have been 8 months pregnant, and she was angry because she could not get drunk. She was angry at this because it wasn't letting her get drunk. So when we talk about that trauma that, Indigenous women carry, and this woman had a story like many probably would not survive. I knew that. But at the same time, you're there and people normalize this, right? For me, it was like, how can you even enjoy this party when you have a mama over here? Like, I couldn't. But at the same time, that is her choice. That is her choice. And if that is what she wants to do, then that is what. Fortunately, years down the road, I saw the same mama at one of the conferences. And it was much later in life. The boy was a young teenager. And, my son has FASD. No shit. But you're here. And your son is here. And that is amazing. Takes some of us a little longer. But I think the more we have those conversations with our moms in those prenatals, talking about FASD, normalizing that conversation, and just making it table talk, I think would go a long way when we talk about prevention. Michael is almost 18 years old. He is moving into his very first apartment this evening, which is why I am in town. Michael is amazing. He's come a long way. And that's not to say it's just been me that's built up this awesome young man. And I can't, like, community networking supports from the Friendship Center, walking with me through that diagnostic process, supporting me through that, offering that. Michael's been in the program, 17, I would say 10 years, 9, 10 years. He's been with Shkagamakwe since they started that the Young Thunderbirds. So it's not solely me and getting my shit together as a mom and dealing with my addiction and traumas. It's that community that came around this young man to support him. And even our camera guy here has sat at the big drum with him. So he's got plenty of uncles out there, guided by those teachings when those young boys sit at that drum. So even though, he had a mom who struggled with addiction, who wasn't always nurturing, nor did he have a stable male father figure in his life, and his father still struggles with addiction today. He had uncles around that drum. He had supports. He had elders to build him up. And I think that is why, when you look at it, and we talked about the conference last year that my brother and I had spoken at, it's the same journey, but so very different. When you look at my brother Martin and Mishan, if Martin had been early diagnosed, that record, that dangerous offender or whatever it is, that could have all been prevented, But you can't look back on that. When he found out and he started learning about what he lives with, things changed then. It put so much into context for him, just knowing. And that's why, that's why I get headaches when there's lights on. That's why I need sunglasses. That's why it was so easy in jail, because there was that structure, there was that routine. It really, and then coming out here in the world was so hard. And he'd be back in again. So it really helped to understand that part. So then how do I bring jail, the routines and structure of jail into my home? I'm not going to go a lot into Marty's home, but things are just so. A little bit of OCD, maybe. Everything's clean, he's got that structure, he's built it for himself. And that happened after once he started learning about FASD. This is what I need. Mishan, we've been able to kind of adapt as we were learning about it. But early diagnosis, definitely the difference is there. You can see it. And it does have a huge impact on the child's life, teenage life, adult life. The earlier the diagnosis, the better. I don't know what Michael said, so I can't really bring it in, but I wanted to give him his space to be as real and honest as he could. I mentioned to him coming in, there's nothing that you can say that's gonna make mom sad or hurt me, because we've walked this part. We've dealt with a lot of the stuff that would, hurt, with the exception of the 2 little spiels there. But I wanted him to be as honest as possible, so I stayed away. So I can't really tie into what he shared because I don't know. But I was here when Martin was talking about the struggles and stuff like that. So a lot of the time it's us. When you have a son that lives with, I'm suspected of but undiagnosed, and I didn't even know that until I sat with my brother through his diagnostic process, or the state beginning of it. And I'm in university at this time. I think it was fourth year university when Martin went through it, and social work. So they're there, and the team on the other side, it was like telehealth style at Chicago said that, there's, you're likely affected as well. There's a high probability. If your mother is an alcoholic, chances are you live with those effects. And this is a conversation I have with so many moms, talking about how many Indigenous people struggle with addiction, alcoholism, whatever it may be. I was going with how I lead into mums, like how do I get my mums to get to that point where they're ready to confront that their child may be living with fetal alcohol effects. And we've got so many mums who are struggling with opiate addiction, whatever it may be, on methadone. So having that conversation with mums in that program or in a treatment center, that not to normalize it, but to take less of that guilt off, that my mom was an alcoholic, her mother before her was an alcoholic. We're undoing 500 plus years of colonization. Like, it's not just on that mom. You have to lift some of that guilt off. You have to lift some of that guilt off of me. That was done through that process. So that's what I try and do. When I say how many Indigenous people struggle, this is why we struggle with addiction. That takes some of that guilt off the mom and places it where it needs to be. It's not just on her, so that she is ready to look at how that addiction impacted her child. And that needs to happen. So it's not just an Indigenous issue. No, it's not. I've learned this through going to the FASD conferences. This is also affects every race, every ethnicity. And it was funny because at one of the FASD conferences, it says white kids who are living with FASD are living with autism. It's so enmeshed. Like, if you're a white kid and you have a learning disability and you're hyperactive and impulse control, well, that child has autism. If you're Indigenous, you have FASD. So it's again, we can go on a whole other thing about that, but it affects everybody. If you consume alcohol while you're carrying a child, while you're carrying baby in your belly, anything you put into your body affects that baby growing. Anything. Too much sugar, too much pop, everything. But we're focusing on alcohol here. So from the moment of conception to, that one glass of wine, or we're not going to go into stats, but yeah. And this is my family.